My ex-husband said I was just a footnote in his success story, so he erased me from the very home I built with my own hands. He toasted champagne by the pool I designed, told our friends I'd end up baking scraps for stray cats behind my sister's garage. But while he bragged, I studied. While he laughed, I planned. And what I gave him in return wasn't noise. It was legacy, wrapped in silence, signed in law, and delivered to his front door like fate. He said I was just a footnote in his success story, that after everything we built together, I was the part he could edit out. And that's exactly what he did. One court date, one bitter smile, and I was gone. Erased from the mansion I poured my youth into, like I'd never existed there at all. My name is Claire, and that mansion, I didn't just live in it, I built it. I traced its blueprints on my kitchen counter with a ruler I borrowed from my mother. I spent Saturdays comparing floor tiles, picking the ones that would feel warm in winter and cool in summer. I planted every rose bush in the front garden myself, fingers scraped, sunburned, but proud. It was our dream home. I just didn't know I was the only one dreaming. After 15 years of marriage, he came home with cologne I didn't recognize and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. A month later, the papers arrived. Adultery, lies, cold settlements. He fought like a man who wanted everything and got it. My name vanished from the deed before I could even pack the last box. My toothbrush was still in the bathroom drawer when the locks changed. Then came the stories. The ones he told at dinner parties, on golf courses, over whiskey glasses and winks. That I was off baking cupcakes in my sister's garage, feeding strays like a charity case, moving on in her own weird way. He said it all with a smirk, like my absence was a joke he'd written. But I didn't scream. I didn't throw things or send bitter texts. I just stood there, outside the gates of the home I designed, and whispered to myself, let him laugh. Let him feel victorious. Because while he was busy turning my legacy into a punchline, I was already planning the rewrite, and this time, the ending would be mine. You've heard betrayal stories before, haven't you? But let me ask you this. What happens when the betrayal doesn't end at heartbreak, but wipes out your identity, your dignity, and every trace you ever existed? Stick with me, because this next part, it will make you feel like it happened to you. The day the judge ruled in his favor, I stood outside the gates of my own home with nothing but a small suitcase and a coat that didn't block the wind. Just beyond the iron fence, he was laughing with his lawyer, champagne glass in hand, leaning back by the pool we once built together. The same pool I had dug design sketches for on the back of napkins, dreamed about during sleepless nights, budgeted for down to the tile. Now it reflected his smile, and none of mine. Friends stopped calling. Silence replaced sympathy. The women who once drank wine with me on that veranda now liked her Instagram photos, clicked heart emojis under his vacation shots. His fiancée, younger, smoother, curated like a luxury brochure, sent me a message that read, I hope you find peace and plumbing. I stared at it for a long time before deleting it, not because it hurt, but because it confirmed what I already knew. I wasn't just replaced, I was erased. I moved into a small rental near the outskirts of town. The kind with low ceilings and neighbors who didn't ask names. The floors were cold, the sink never stopped dripping, and at night I curled into a ball, not from the chill, but from the echo, the silence of being forgotten. I went from the woman who picked linens for the master suite to someone who used coin laundry and slept under thin quilts that smelled of someone else's detergent. But the hardest part wasn't the cold or the quiet. It was the scrolling. The nights I couldn't sleep when I would, against my better judgment, open my phone and see pictures of the house, my house, dressed up like a stranger. The rose garden I nurtured for over a decade torn out, replaced by a gravel courtyard. The greenhouse, flattened for a tennis court that nobody played on. The home I poured myself into, now curated for spectacle. Everything I touched had been bulldozed, painted over, redesigned, as if I had never been there. And yet, nothing prepared me for the night I saw the fox. I was walking home from the bus stop, arms full of groceries, when I spotted it, limping, trembling, eyes wide with fear. It had been hit by a car and left there, twitching in the dark, as people passed it like it was nothing. I crouched beside it, whispered to it even though I knew it couldn't understand, and as I looked into its eyes, I saw my own reflection. Not just the woman I was, but the way I had been discarded, injured and ignored on the side of someone else's success. That night, I sat on the edge of my mattress and didn't cry. I simply stared into the dark and said aloud, to no one in particular, "If he can turn beauty into power, then I can turn power into refuge." It didn't feel like a declaration. It felt like a seed finally cracking open underground. If you were me, standing in the dark, erased and forgotten, what would you do? Cry? Disappear? Or would you start sharpening your mind in silence? What I did next might surprise you more than his betrayal ever could. When the pain dulled just enough to let silence in, I began reading. Not poetry or prayers, laws, zoning regulations, nonprofit loopholes, municipal archives buried beneath outdated hyperlinks. I had no assets, no allies left in that world, but I had time and fury, and both are unforgiving teachers. Every night, while the rest of the city slept, I sat at the edge of my narrow bed with a flashlight and a highlighter, tracing the veins of bureaucracy like a woman mapping her escape route from a burning building. I started volunteering at a small animal rescue center 20 miles out. I swept kennels, bottled-fed injured birds, kept my head down and my ears open. People trusted those who listened without needing to speak, and I absorbed everything: how funding worked, who signed off permits, which officials were too slow to notice. A quiet signature passed under the door. I built relationships like someone planting a garden in a storm, carefully and with purpose. Then one afternoon, deep in an old planning ordinance, I found it, a state-level grant for wildlife rehabilitation centers established on land with prior sustainable use. My hands trembled. The mansion still carried my name on the original architectural application. A buried footnote, but enough. Enough to say, I had history, and history mattered. I wasn't confused. I wasn't delusional. And I damn sure wasn't dead. So I built a plan, not with emotion, but with strategy. Legal, financial, and reputational pressure, converging like a trap closing. First, I learned that Derek was in the middle of raising capital for a luxury resort pitch and needed liquidity fast. The mansion wasn't mortgageable anymore. The deed was still in his name, unencumbered, which made it vulnerable. So, I made it toxic. A discreet complaint was filed about illegal pool construction disrupting groundwater integrity. Another letter, unsigned, landed on the desk of the local conservation board, citing that the property lay adjacent to a former ecological buffer zone. Then came the press. An old friend of mine, now an environmental columnist, ran a piece titled, "When Gardens Die, How Wealth Drowns Nature in Concrete." I helped that article travel, whispering it through environmental forums, wildlife blogs, social media collectives. Derek's name began to rot before his signature hit his next investor pitch deck. Meanwhile, I called in an old favor. A lawyer I'd once helped through a grief so raw she couldn't speak in full sentences. She was now a fierce environmental rights advocate. With her guidance, I established a nonprofit, Sanctuary Grove. Its mission? To convert urban properties into rescue and rehabilitation spaces for displaced wildlife. She helped make it legitimate, on paper, on record, in the eyes of the law. By the time Derek listed the mansion for private sale, trying to scrape together a down payment for his next big venture, I was already behind the curtain, watching, waiting, setting the stage for a closing act he never saw coming. You're probably thinking, wow, she's getting smart about it. But I haven't even pulled the trigger yet. The next part? That's when the tables really start to turn. Don't blink, because this is where he walks straight into the trap. By the time Derek realized his empire was crumbling, it was already too late to stop the bleeding. The resort project he had been so loud about, his next big legacy, collapsed in silence. Investors pulled out after the environmental article went viral, citing reputational instability and regulatory complications. His bridge loan came due in 30 days, and no bank wanted to touch the mess his name had become. His lawyers scrambled, but the numbers didn't lie. He needed fast cash, and the only asset with real liquidity was the mansion. My mansion. He listed it privately, hoping to keep things quiet. Pride disguised as damage control. But I had been waiting for that listing like a chess player watches for the king to flinch. Through a nonprofit trust registered under Sanctuary Grove, we submitted a cash offer. Clean, immediate, no contingencies. The number was lower than market, but it came with no questions and a tight deadline. He took it. Of course he did. He thought he was playing smart, offloading controversy to some tree-hugging NGO while buying himself time to pivot. I imagine he signed the contract with a grin. He bragged about it too, told his golf buddies the headlines hadn't hurt him one bit, that he was rid of the house, rid of the noise, and back in control. Let the greenies turn it into a butterfly farm, he joked at one brunch. I've got real deals on the table. He didn't know that the board member who coordinated the wire transfer was a woman I once gave shelter to during a brutal winter. That the paperwork he signed bore legal fingerprints I had engineered. That every signature, every page, every word had passed through my hands like a loaded weapon. The moment he sold the house, thinking he'd won, was the first moment I truly felt the tide turn. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. It was precision. The first domino falling. The first twist of the blade. And when a friend of his smugly asked me later if I was proud of snagging that property, I smiled, looked him in the eye, and simply said, "No, I didn't snag it. I reclaimed it." He blinked, confused. I didn't elaborate, because some things don't need to be explained. They just need to be executed. Quietly, legally, and with perfect aim. So, do you remember that feeling when the villain thinks they've won? Yeah, that moment of smug victory? Keep it in mind, because what happens on opening day will wipe that smirk clean off his face. The air buzzed with excitement. Reporters clustered near the front gate, holding cameras and microphones like hunters chasing something wild. Volunteers were already leading groups through the newly built aviary, and donors were sipping lemonade under the old oak tree I had once begged him not to cut down. The sound of life pulsed through every inch of the estate. Birds chirping, children laughing, dogs barking softly from the rehab wing. The place that once echoed only with shallow status now breathed with purpose. I wore my faded jeans and the soft cotton shirt he used to mock. The same gardening gloves dangled from my belt, the pair he once laughed at and called farm chic. I greeted each guest by name, thanking them not just for being there, but for believing in what this could be. No ribbon cutting, no speech, just life where there used to be emptiness. And then, like a storm rolling in from the wrong direction, he appeared. Derek came stomping through the gates, his face flushed and fists clenched. A lawyer, clearly younger and clearly nervous, trailed behind him, trying to keep up. Derek's eyes scanned the crowd, confusion curdling into disbelief as he took in the sanctuary signs, the donation boxes, the TV crew interviewing a rescued fox's caretaker. His lips moved, forming the beginning of a protest, of something meant to reassert control. But then he saw the cameras. He paused mid-step, his shoulders locked. He realized, on some deep, primal level, that this wasn't just a public relations disaster. It was something worse. It was irreversible. The house wasn't his trophy anymore. It had become something sacred, something bulletproof, protected by conservation laws and goodwill. By the time he understood that, it was already carved into press releases and city planning records. He opened his mouth again, maybe to argue, maybe to scream. But a camera swung his way, and his jaw clicked shut like a trap. The lawyer whispered something, probably legal jargon or useless comfort, but Derek didn't respond. He turned. He walked out. No threats, no tantrum. Just a silent retreat, red-faced and trembling. And in that silence, I stood still, breathing in the scent of lavender I had replanted in the very same spot he once paved over. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I simply watched him walk away. Because some victories don't need celebration. They just need to be witnessed. And that day, the world was watching. You're probably wondering what came next. What followed? I call it poetic revenge. The kind that aches in his chest every time he drives past what used to be his kingdom. The day after Derek smugly signed away the deed, he woke up to a knock that rattled the calm off his espresso cup. A legal courier stood at his door, holding an envelope stamped with the state seal and the unmistakable chill of consequence. Inside was a court summons. Sanctuary Grove, the organization he had so confidently dismissed as some tree-hugging nonprofit, had filed a motion accusing him of selling property without disclosing its contested environmental status. He skimmed the document in disbelief, his eyes darting past the terms: ecological review, pending conservation ordinance, withheld disclosures. His breath hitched. He called his broker. No answer. Called again. This time, a blunt voice responded, explaining that the transaction had been flagged for legal review and that all funds were frozen pending resolution. Translation: no money, no escape hatch, no second act. He had already signed over the property, but the payment, his only hope of clearing the debt from his failed resort, was suspended. And the cherry on top? Until the matter was resolved, Sanctuary Grove had been granted temporary stewardship over the land. He had lost the house, he had lost the money, and now he had lost control. He tried to contact the buyer. The only reply was an email from a law firm, brief and cold, reminding him that all future communication should be directed to counsel. He stood there, surrounded by silence in a condo far from his dreams, clutching a legal document that smelled like smoke from the fire he started himself. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, I was busy. I turned his beloved wine cellar into a rehabilitation space for injured foxes. The marble fountain he once called the centerpiece of elegance, I repurposed it into a duck pond, complete with native plants. The grand sitting room where he once hosted fundraisers for his ego now housed owlets and orphaned raccoons. The velvet drapes were gone, the ego dismantled, and on the wrought iron gate, gleaming under the morning sun, I mounted a brass plaque. Not large, not flashy, just 5 words, engraved with purpose. For all those once abandoned. I knew he'd show up sooner or later, and I was just as sure he'd leave bitter, powerless, and with nothing he could do about it. He drives past sometimes. I know. Because one of the volunteers saw his car slow near the gate. Maybe he hoped it was a dream. Maybe he needed to see it with his own eyes. That house, once his symbol of power, now stands as a living sanctuary. Not just for animals, but for every piece of beauty he tried to bury. And every time he passes it, I hope he sees exactly what I built from the ruins of what he broke. Some people chase revenge. I built a home for redemption. But before I found peace, I had to walk through a storm of memories. I live now in the gardener's cottage behind the mansion. It's small, only 2 rooms, with walls that lean slightly when the wind rushes through the trees, but it breathes. The ivy has started to climb back over the stone, softening what time once forgot. I left the broken tiles on the back step exactly where they are. Not because I can't fix them, believe me, I could, but because they remind me of something important. Not everything has to be perfect to be whole. Each morning, I wake not to dread or the cold echo of loneliness, but to birdsong. Not just one, but dozens. Sparrows, finches, a cheeky parrot someone once tried to smuggle across the state line and ended up surrendering to our center. I named him Captain. He calls me names in 3 different accents. It makes me laugh every single time. I brew tea the way I used to, the same chipped blue mug in hand, but it tastes different now. Not like survival, like peace. Children visit the center most weekends. They shuffle along behind volunteers with clipboards, wide-eyed, their hands pressed to the glass as they whisper about foxes and owls, and a tortoise named Gertrude, who moves slower than morning light. Sometimes I sit with them beneath the oak, the one that stood long before my story began and will outlive even the best chapters. I tell them about healing, about how some wounds don't disappear but can grow roots and bloom into something unexpected. I show them how to mix the feed, how to gently hold a squirrel with a splinted paw, how to listen with their hearts. There's one little fox who follows me everywhere. She came in the day that the gates opened, shaking, half-starved, eyes too old for her size. She never left. I named her Hope. Fitting, really. She curls at my feet when I sit on the porch and watches the world with that alert stillness only animals possess. Like she's memorizing every breeze, every moment. I still drink my tea on the old veranda, the same one where I used to host dinner parties, where I once cried into the sleeves of my best dress the night he left me, where I stood barefoot watching him celebrate my absence with flutes of champagne and hollow laughter. But now, the silence here doesn't punish me. It embraces me. It's not an echo anymore. It's a presence. And for the first time in years, I don't feel like I'm waiting for anything. I'm just here. Sometimes I speak with Amelia, my niece. She visits now and then, always bringing her sketchbook and 1,000 questions. She wants to be a veterinarian, or a poet, or both. We sit under the wisteria in the back, and I listen while she reads. She told me once, "Aunt Clara, you're like one of those stories where the dragon becomes the gardener." I cried after she left. Not because I was sad, but because I realized she was right. The staff at Sanctuary Grove grows slowly. No one's here for the money. They're here because they believe in something bigger than themselves. We laugh a lot, we cry sometimes too. When a rescue doesn't make it, when a hawk we raised takes its first flight, we plant flowers in memory of every creature we lose. We celebrate everyone that survives. The house itself, the mansion, looks different now. It isn't sterile anymore. The walls have dirt under the nails. The furniture's been replaced with crates, feeding stations, nests. The floors creak with purpose. Even the air smells different, earthier, real. Sometimes I catch Derek's car rolling past. He doesn't stop, doesn't slow down anymore, just drives by with the windows up, sunglasses on, like maybe if he can't see us, we can't see him. But I know he does see. I know he read the plaque. I know he knows what this place has become. This isn't about revenge anymore. It was once. But that fire burned through and left something better in its place. What I built wasn't to hurt him. It was to reclaim myself. To stitch beauty back where it was torn. To make sure no creature, no soul, no woman ever feels disposable again under this roof. So now, when the morning sun rises through the trees and hits the copper gate just right, the plaque gleams. For all those once abandoned. And every time I see it, I whisper to the wind, to the animals, to my younger self who thought she'd never feel whole again. We made it. We made it all the way home. You might wonder, what happened to him? Did he ever feel regret? Oh, he did. But it wasn't loud. It was quiet, lonely, and exactly what he never expected. A downfall without anyone lifting a finger. He moved into a condo downtown, a modern, soulless space stacked between glass towers and steel shadows. It wasn't the kind of place you chose. It was the kind of place you ended up in when everything else was stripped away. No more curated views of rolling hills. No marble staircases to ascend like royalty. Just blank white walls, gray light, and the quiet hum of a refrigerator that never turned off. There were no dinner parties now. No fiancé lighting candles on imported tables. She had left the moment the press called the mansion a converted habitat for injured wildlife. Her words, from what I heard, were quick and clean. I didn't sign up to live in a zoo. His phone stopped ringing. The congratulatory messages dried up first, then the polite check-ins, then even the passive likes on social media. He posted once, an attempt at salvaging something, standing beside a skyline at sunset, whiskey glass in hand. The caption read, "Every empire starts somewhere." It got 2 likes, one from a spam account, one from his cousin who probably didn't even read it. He never posted again. The investors in his resort project had seen the article, the one that called him a textbook case of ego over ecosystem, the one with a photo of the fountain-turned-duck pond on the front page of the Sunday Environmental Digest. They had called emergency meetings, one after another, until eventually their silence said everything. He didn't just lose their money, he lost their trust. His name had become a punchline in real estate forums, a cautionary tale wrapped in marble and irony. He still checks the center's website. I know this because we upgraded our analytics, and one IP shows up regularly from his part of the city. It always lingers a little longer on the homepage, always pauses on the gallery, always scrolls through the donor wall, where my name isn't at the top, but is unmistakably there. He never clicks the volunteer tab. Sometimes I imagine him watching our live streams of Hope, the little fox, curling into a volunteer's lap, or of the school children listening wide-eyed as a vet explains how a broken wing heals. I wonder if he sees the life returning to the space he tried so hard to hollow out, if he recognizes the piano room, now housing rescued songbirds, if he notices the fireplace mantle where his awards once sat, now holding a collage of paw prints from the animals we've saved. He never comments, never donates, but his silence is louder than applause. I didn't block him, didn't ban him from the site. I didn't need to. Watching was its own sentence. His world grew smaller. I heard from someone who used to work for him, someone who now volunteers on weekends cleaning raccoon enclosures, that Derek keeps to himself, doesn't answer messages, doesn't go out much. The lights in his condo are always off by 8. He eats alone, shops at odd hours, walks quickly, head down, like a man hoping to pass through the world unnoticed. There are no lawsuits, no vengeance left to serve. The courts have closed their files. The press has moved on. And I've moved on too. But Derek is still stuck somewhere between what he lost and what he knows he'll never get back. Sometimes, when I'm pruning the lavender near the plaque, I feel a presence across the street, a parked car, a flash of recognition. But he never crosses the gate again. I don't think he could. I don't think he knows how to exist in a world that doesn't place him at its center. He doesn't see me anymore. Not really. He sees what I built, what he abandoned. And worse, he sees it thriving. He sees the mansion standing taller now, not as a monument to power, but as a living, breathing shelter for all the lives he deemed too small to matter. And that's what undid him. Not scandal, not screaming, not court orders, but the quiet devastation of being replaced by meaning, by kindness, by something real. He was never defeated by me. I never needed to raise a hand. I only needed to raise something better from the rubble. I didn't want revenge. Not really. I wanted results. And now, every time he looks at the house he lost, at the center he can't unsee, he gets to live with the most brutal truth of all. No one took it from him. He gave it away. Clare Haven now rescues over 70 animals a year. Foxes, owls, stray dogs, possums with eyes too wise for their age. Some come in bruised and broken. Some come in silent and starving. All of them leave better. We've become more than just a center. We've become a heartbeat for this town. On weekdays, kids in bright shirts crowd around outdoor pens, jotting notes about migration patterns and owl pellets, their pencils clutched like tools of wonder. They laugh when the parrot swears in Spanish. They cry when we release a healed hawk into the sky. And they always come back, sometimes with siblings, sometimes with parents, sometimes with a sandwich for the fox named Hope. We've expanded, not with marble and showy gates, but with purpose. We launched a fundraiser for ecological education last fall and surpassed our goal in under a week. Local schools now send their science classes to us once a month. Teenagers volunteer for credit hours and stay for the stories. We started a youth fellowship program last spring, offering stipends for at-risk kids who show interest in wildlife care. Some of them had never touched soil before, Now they know the difference between pine and cedar by smell alone, and the way they light up when a rabbit eats from their palm. It reminds me that healing doesn't just happen in cages. It happens between people too. Reporters occasionally come around, curious to know more. "What made you do it?" they ask, pens hovering, recorders blinking red. I never give them the full version. That story belongs to me, to my bruises and my survival. Instead, I smile and tell them the truth they'll understand. Someone once tried to take everything from me, so I left behind something bigger. I don't wear bitterness. I wear boots, the same worn leather ones I had on the day I moved into the gardener's cottage, the ones that still carry mud from the first fox pen we built. I don't speak about vengeance. I speak about value and action, and the quiet satisfaction of planting something in a space someone else tried to scorch. There's a sign we installed at the garden's edge, where the roses bloom again, where the bees hum like old friends reunited. It reads, "In care, we restore." It's small, brass, and placed low so children can see it. I didn't want it to feel grandiose. I wanted it to feel true. I still drink my tea on the same porch. The view has changed. The fountain sings a gentler song now. There's no tension in the wind, no ghosts pacing behind the curtains. Just birds, the rustle of trees, and sometimes the laughter of volunteers cleaning out feeding stations. Hope, the fox, still curls near my feet, her fur a little grayer now. We both are, but we're here, still standing, still tending. People send letters, strangers, survivors, women who say, "He left me with nothing but I planted a garden." Men who whisper, "I lost my name but found my voice." Children who sign in crayon, "Thank you for saving the animals." I keep those letters in a wooden box on my desk. When days feel heavy, I read one. Then I get up and keep going. Clearhaven isn't just a rescue center. It's a promise. A stitched-together answer to the question, what do you do when someone tries to erase you? My answer is simple. You write yourself back in, with care, with roots, with something so alive, no one can burn it down again. I've updated my will. The property will remain a protected zone long after I'm gone. The team will run the center, expand it, teach future generations how to guard the quiet and fight for the vulnerable. There will be no inheritance to steal, only a legacy to uphold. Sometimes I imagine him, Derek, scrolling past another article. Maybe one day, he'll read about our expansion, about the new sanctuary wing built in the old wine cellar. Maybe he'll see that the garden he raised has returned, stronger, taller, filled with native wildflowers that burst open in spring like they've never known loss. Maybe he'll feel something, or maybe he won't. It doesn't matter. Forgiveness doesn't mean inheritance. It means I don't need his name to move forward. It means he doesn't get to live in my mind rent-free. I built something without him. I loved without him. I flourished in the very soil he tried to poison. And every time a rescued bird takes flight, every time a child holds a creature gently in their palms, I know the truth of what I've made. That house was never about walls. It was about heart, and mine beats louder now than it ever did under his roof. So I sip my tea, I look out over the wildflowers dancing in the breeze, and I know I've already won. If this story stirred something in you, if it made you feel, think, or remember your own battles, leave a comment below and let me know. And if you want more stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with me. I have many more to tell.